Hey guys, so last week I did a little introduction to homeschooling without a curriculum and a general outline of how I go about it. And now we're going to go into each individual subject, and I'm going to share a little bit how I do this for each subject. I thought we would start with English because it's one of my favorites because it involves books, which I like to own and read a lot of. And this is probably the one that I have like the least amount of resources to show, unless I was like to show you all the books. English, for the most part for us, is just a lot of reading and a lot of writing. We do a lot of it in our home and have a lot of books. But I want to share some like specific things that we do. If you want more resources on like how to teach your kids to read, I would recommend going and watching my video like this from 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago. I will leave it linked below, and I think I share a little bit more in there on like how I actually taught reading, and I do think I have a separate video all about how I taught my kids to read. But because my kids are older now, we're in a different phase, so I wanted to share more resources for the specific stage that we're at now. But definitely you can watch that old video as well. We're in the stage now where we are working on spelling, grammar, just reading fluency, reading comprehension, and same with writing. They've got the basics, but we're just trying to improve where we're at. So a fun resource I want to mention that I don't have right here in front of me is Mad Libs. If you want to teach your kids the parts of speech, Mad Libs is such a fun way to do it. Those are the things that are like a story with the blanks, and people need to insert a verb or a noun, and then at the end you read the story with those inserted words, and it's just a silly story. That is a really fun way to teach children parts of speech. I would much rather do a million Mad Libs than have to sit there and like run the definition of what a verb is and what a noun is through their heads a bunch of times. It works better and is more fun just to kind of play it in a game like Mad Libs. And so you can get a bunch of free printables online. We do have, often at the dollar store, they'll have Mad Libs I can't even say the word, Mad Libs booklets. And so we'll just often pick those up as well. But that has been a fun resource. Now, another fun resource, okay, if you've been here at all and we've talked about this at all, I love poetry. My kids, they're not on the same page with me when it comes to poetry, but hopefully one day they will be. But I have found that bribery works a lot, and I don't know if this is like a Julie Bogart like Brave Writer idea, or if this is more of a Charlotte Mason idea. I don't know where this idea came from, but the idea of poetry tea time, where you sit down and you read some poems and you have a snack and tea. In our house it's usually hot chocolate, and sometimes I'll make a cool little like dessert for us, and sometimes it's like, okay, we have marshmallows and we have chocolate chips. But I bribe my children to do some poetry with me on a regular basis. It is one of the things in our loop schedule for the year. And so for poetry, I mean, I have started quite a poetry collection already. I often look at thrift stores. I look on Book Outlet, which if you've never used it has discounted books. I have a referral link for $5 off your first order. I can leave that below if you're interested. We have gotten quite a few poetry books from there. But while you're building your collection, I think it makes the most sense to start with a collection of poetry so you have variety. So I really do like this Poems to Learn by Heart by Caroline Kennedy. This has a bunch of different poems from different poets and some nice illustrations. We go through here and read these kind of on a regular basis. The other one that I like, this one I found at the thrift store, is the Random House Book of Poetry for Children. This one I got out from the library quite a few times, and then I found it at the thrift store and got really excited because there's a lot of poems in here, and there's a lot of variety in the types of poems as well. So if you can get some kind of poetry collection and then start collecting other poetry books as you find them, especially if you can find like funny poems to get your kids interested, like some Shel Silverstein, or like my next author here. We really like Jack Preletsky. He's very Shel Silverstein-esque, and this book is a really great resource. It's Pigs Pizza, Pigs, and Poetry, How to Write a Poem. And these are pretty much just lessons on teaching your kids how to write poetry, how to come up with ideas, etc. And his examples are really funny. It's a really engaging way for kids to learn. So I found this one off of Book Outlet, and they often have a bunch of his poetry books there as well. We are maybe kind of like an odd family in the fact that we don't do something specific for language arts in the way that we just read books that seem interesting to us. So I've already shared my daughter's list for grade 8 of the books that she's going to be reading this year, my son's list of books he's using for grade 5 going to be reading. I gave them each a priority list that I would like them to finish, and free reads that I think they'll enjoy or maybe push them out of their comfort zone a bit. So I gave them those lists. Those are for them to do on their own time as part of school, but I'm not going to be quizzing them on them. And then in addition, we usually have a family book going, and we usually do this in audiobook format because I am not good at reading aloud, and I know I could exercise that muscle and probably get better, but I've just decided to go the audiobook route. So we use a lot of apps for audiobooks. From our library, we have Libby and we have Hoopla. Those are both free with our library cards, so we often get books from there. We usually have an Audible annual subscription, so we can get books pretty cheap, and or I will pay attention to when they have sales. And sometimes Audible's sales on their ebook or their audiobooks will be cheaper than using a credit. And then there's also Scribd is another resource that I use at times. So it's kind of like Netflix for books. So you pay a monthly fee, which I also do have a code for 2 months free for that I can leave linked below. You pay a monthly fee and then you have access to this library of audiobooks and ebooks. But I usually use it for the audiobooks. We usually have a family audiobook on the go, and that has created like a really cool family culture and different conversations depending on the books that we're listening to. And then a fun resource that we don't use this in any like real format. This is everything you need to ace English language arts in one big fat notebook, the complete middle school study guide. And this goes over all sorts of different things in English. So we've got like parts of speech. This is about poetry, textual analysis and evidence. So I see this as a resource if my kids want to learn more about something. Often we will turn here. And my daughter was recently looking through the grade, they have, for middle grades, they have fiction reading lists, and some of her favorites are actually on the grade 7 list. She just shared her favorites here, and I think 8th grade list has like The Hobbit, which she loves. So this is just like a really cool, I wouldn't say textbook, we don't work through it, but it's a really good resource to have on hand. And then this year, for the first time ever, we are doing spelling tests at the request of my 5th grader, and I'm just making lists of words that I'm noticing that they're spelling incorrectly. So every week or so, it's in our loop schedule, so it kind of comes up when it comes up. I'm giving them a list of words for a pre-test, and then the next time it comes up, then we are testing them on these words. And we have just started this. I didn't find spelling tests worked for me as a kid, but we're gonna give it a try for this year. I think making lists specific to each child will be helpful. For my daughter, I actually went through and I looked for a list of the most commonly misspelt English words, and I've been giving her those. So I feel a little bit mean because these are words that adults are usually spelling wrong, and I'm putting on her list, but she's smart, she can handle it. And then in the writing department, this has kind of varied. My daughter loves to write. She has self-published a novel already earlier this year. She does a lot of writing on her own. She has a writing blog where she shares updates. She's currently trying to work on building a community for writers. A lot of her writing is just very independent. This year she's going very unschooling. I'm just letting her go with it. I'm not really checking in on her except when she wants me to read things, because She has tons of ideas, lots going on. A couple years ago, I created a creative writing journal just with like some different prompts for creative writing that we will sometimes use. If you have a child who is younger or struggles with writing, I would recommend writing down the story because it can be hard for them to think of a story and write it down. That way they just have to come up with a story and verbalize it, and you can write it down, or they can speak it into a phone that has the speech to text thing on. We do that quite a bit. And so yes, our English language arts is, I'm sure, much more on the relaxed side than a lot of people, but I'm not really that concerned, honestly. We've been doing this the entire time, and like I said, my 12-year-old has already self-published a novel that I think she's done a really good job with, so we're just gonna keep going this way. If you have favorite English resources, language arts resources, leave them in the comments. I would love to check them out. I'm sure other people would love to check them out. If you also lean more towards unschooling, I would love to hear how you go about it in your home. Thanks so much for being here, you guys.